Good evening, everybody. I hope you're all well and have been outside enjoying the sunshine. I hope it's still sunny up in Edinburgh because it's definitely been lovely down here. So today I wanted to cover sort of a healthy kitchen, which can lead or encourage and promote a healthy body and healthy mind. And when I sort of put this out, I think it was only last week, I hadn't quite formulated exactly what I was going to cover, but I know that I mentioned covering snacks and sort of making sure that we are utilising our kitchen and our store-covered essentials to help support us, especially at the moment when it's a bit more challenging to go to the shops and things. But then I sort of started thinking about the even bigger picture for a healthy kitchen, and the list that I came up with, I was just sort of dreaming, was quite unbelievable of all the different things. So it covered things like your cooking utensils, the pots and pans you use, the different oils, obviously snacks, which I said that we definitely cover today because that's quite a big one at the moment. But there's so much in what goes on, and it's not just the food that we eat, but it's how we cook it and what we use to cook it can influence the nutritional value of the food that we consume. So I thought I'd cover a little bit of that at the moment to start with. But it's because we're time pressured because of the NHS clap for carers that I completely just didn't twig was tonight as well. So I want to keep it as concise but as relevant as possible. So I'll do a little bit on those, on how we cook and our utensils and things, but I'm very mindful at the moment. A, we can't get to the shops. B, a lot of people financially have taken a big hit. So I want to focus on the things that you can do that are really simple, easy tweaks to how you cook, but also how you nourish yourself. So I've got a list here so I don't forget in the sort of the blurb that I'm coming out with. So it's just down here. So essentially, a lot of people think it's about the food that we eat. So whether we go organic or non-organic, and that can influence the nutritional value. But I think it's, as a family ourselves, we can't afford organic food. It is a lot more expensive. So there are ways that you can maximize the nutritional value of what you eat. So if we touch on first sort of different cooking methods, and then go into different utensils and ways that you can cook to reduce the toxicity that you can sort of pass on through your cooking pans onto the food. So if we talk about cooking methods, so the higher the heat generally, and we tend to use oils and things when we're cooking, so for baking and frying, the higher the heat changes the molecular structure of the fats. And there are some fats that have a higher smoking point, it's called. So a point at which they sort of stay stable, but then once they're heated past that element, then they're changed. And that can affect how it clogs up, I suppose, our cells. So how we get some nutrients in and out of the cells, but also our arteries and different parts of the body, so it can affect the brain function, all sorts. So there are certain oils that are really good for cooking with. There are definitely oils that are really good for drizzling on your food so you don't actually submit them to any heat. And the ones that I found that work for me and my family are rapeseed oil. So in a lot of supermarkets, it's really quite cheap. It's often called vegetable oil, so you need to look on the back and it'll say rapeseed oil. And that is obviously prevalent in the UK, so it's relevant for where we're living. It helps us capture the light and the energy sort of in our latitude, so it's really good for us. And that's great for cooking, so if you want to do frying or baking or anything, oilseed rape is fabulous oil for that. So we tend to, if I'm doing a roast, I'll just put a little bit in. So I know some people tend to put quite a lot of oil in, and the oil sort of makes the potatoes crispy, but we tend to just sort of drizzle a bit on and shush it around, but maybe leave it in the oven for a little bit longer so that it crisps up. So you're using less oil, but it's still doing the job that it needs to do. Another oil that's really good, sort of has a high smoking point, so stays stable under high temperatures, is coconut oil. And I'm very well aware that coconuts are not native to the UK, but it is a fabulous oil for using for frying. And I'll come into a technique that you can use to reduce the oil content, but also reduce the heat, so reduce the potential for the oils to change under the heating process. So it's really good for adding to smoothies. Coconut oil is brilliant to help support brain function, for energy, slow release. Really good if you've been doing a workout or a walk and you're just feeling a little bit sort of wobbly, or you just need a quick refuel. Is coconut-based oil, which you can add to smoothies, is a really good way of providing slow release energy to your body. So it doesn't give you a quick hit, but it gives you enough for your body to rebalance and sort of, just get blood sugar levels back again. And when you're using, so for example, frying food like stir fries and things, using a method called steam frying. I don't know whether you've come across that before. So what we tend to do is soften things like onions and garlic first in a little bit of oil. And then when we add the vegetables, I put some water in there. So it reduces the heat of the pan. So you're still using a little bit of oil, but maybe not as much as you would do. But what the water does is it reduces the heat of the pan, but then it steam fries the vegetables. So you're reducing the changed fats and that are unsupportive for the body and promote inflammation. But you're still cooking in one of the healthiest ways. Other fabulous ways to keep the nutrients in the food is steaming. That's one of the best ways to do to cook vegetables, is steaming. Some of the more detrimental ways to cook your fruit and vegetables and anything really, probably one of the worst energetically but also nutritionally, is in a microwave. So we're going sort of from one extreme to the other. So I'm trying to help support you, sort of doing little steps. So maybe adding the water when you're cooking your food, but also trying to highlight ways that are not actually really supportive for nourishing our bodies. So microwaves tend to zap any energetic properties of the food. They also don't tend to cook the food as well as if you're steaming or steam frying or baking. So actually, it doesn't help with that breakdown. So when you're cooking food, it starts that breakdown process, which then you carry on when you're eating and in your stomach acid and your digestive system as a whole. So if you can avoid microwaving your food, then you're actually doing yourself a service. So going for things like steaming, even boiling is better than microwaving your food. So there's some simple sort of tweaks of ways to maximize your nutrient intake. Other things that we can add on to this, I talked about organic, non-organic food, and saying that actually in our budget, organic food is just not there, apart from carrots, because the taste is unbelievably different. It's one of the few things that you can actually taste differently. But when you're trying to create a healthy kitchen, if organic is not on the menu, then there are things you can do to reduce the pesticide levels in the food that you do buy. So, for example, when we come back from having done a big shop at the moment, when we're shopping maybe about every 10, 14 days, is that all the vegetables we do get, we pop in the kitchen sink, which is full of water, and you can either add a couple of tablespoons of apple cider vinegar or some baking powder. And what that does is it helps break down the pesticides that is accumulated on the outside of the vegetables. So things especially like apples, peppers, if you're thinking about foods that sort of are grown above the surface, so maybe not so much potatoes and parsnips and things that are under the ground, but foods that are grown above tend to be quite highly pesticide sprayed and fungicide and herbicide. So that's a really simple and cheap technique that you can use to get rid of and reduce the pesticides that are on the normal food that if you're on a budget. So that's a really simple thing to do, and make sure you rinse it afterwards and then dry it, pop it in the fridge, and A, they should last longer, and B, it's a healthier way for you to eat your fruit and vegetables. Sort of, although it's not organic, it's a better step than just eating the foods and consuming the pesticides. Because a healthy kitchen isn't just about having lots of fruit and vegetables and lovely meals like that. It's about reducing the contamination of the food. So I was just talking about pesticides. Another one that's been really highlighted over the years is plastics and plastic contamination of our food. So there's a big drive about not having water bottles or plastic water bottles, especially if it's been heated. So if you're leaving a plastic water bottle in the car, the plastic can leach into the water and then you're consuming that. And the plastic can alter your hormonal balance. It can affect how your brain works. It can clog up your kidneys and your liver, so that there's lots that you can do to reduce the toxicity of foods that you do buy. So for example, canned food. Cans used to be a fabulous way of preserving your food, but now what they've done is they've coated the cans with plastic. And when they're canning food, they usually put the food in there and then it's heated. And when you heat plastic, it leaches into the food, and it tends to leach into foods that are either acidic or highly sugary. So things like tinned tomatoes is a really key swap that you can make that's really cheap and easily done, especially at the moment if you can find them in the supermarket. I've been in a few times and that part of the shelf has been quite empty. But if you're lucky enough to find it, something like swapping to a passata in a glass bottle means that even though the passata probably would have been heated in the glass bottle, there's no contamination from the plastic. So that's another simple swap. If, for example, you like tinned fruit, or it's something that you like to have in your store cupboard, again, try and go for fruit that you get in glass jars if you can find it. And not every supermarket's like that, but it's just making those little swaps. So other swaps that we've made as a family, so we quite like making our own pizzas at the weekend, is instead of having the tubes of tomato puree or the cans of tomato purees, that we've managed to find glass jars, and that's in Sainsbury's, and it's actually cheaper to buy it in a glass jar than it is to buy it in a tube. And it's better for recycling, sort of the global thing. In fact, we reuse the glass jars to store our leftovers in the fridge or the freezer, so they don't go to waste. But there are little swaps that you can make that can actually have quite a big impact, even though you might not notice that your body's sort of accumulating less plastic. But in your intelligent mind that actually it's being really beneficial to your body to try and avoid these things. So it's also storing. So I mentioned that we use some of our jars to store leftovers and things in the freezer. So the same with jam jars. Bon Maman jars are brilliant at storing things in the freezer. But it's avoiding things like cling film. Cling film, again, is a form of plastic, but it's usually the thinner the plastic, the more of the potential transfer and contamination to your food. So it's using just a plate on top. So if you've got a bowl that you haven't quite finished because you didn't fancy eating all of your supper, just pop another plate on the top, and that can be a really simple, easy way to store your food in the fridge and then have your leftovers the next day without, excuse me, sorry, the dog's grumbling underneath. He's about to do some woofing. I don't know what he's seen. But that's a really easy and simple and cost-effective way to store your food, but without the contamination of things like cling film. Other things that if you're in a position to do it at the moment is cooking utensils. So there's been quite a big drive for going for silicone cooking utensils and bakeware. Now, silicone is not silica. Silica is a natural substance that is basically sand. It's like sand. Whereas silicone is a byproduct from the petrol manufacture. So again, when you heat it, there's some chemical transfer into your food. So if you're using sort of like a silicone spatula when you're cooking, that will transfer some of that toxicity into the food. So it's going for stainless steel, wooden, as long as you care for it and clean it properly. They're really good inert ways of stirring a food, making sauces and things. They're fabulous and they last a long time. The stainless steel you pop in the dishwasher, brilliant. Don't even have to do the washing up, and that's if you've got a dishwasher. And the same with what you use to cook your food. So there's another big thing to have a Teflon pan, because it's non-stick, easy to clean. And Teflon actually is carcinogenic. It is full of lots of chemicals, again from the petroleum company, and many other chemicals. So when you're heating it, some of that is being transferred into the food. So again, some of the best forms of pots and pans are stainless steel. And you can also get some non-toxic ceramic ones. And one of our best investments, and I know you can't get to the shops as easily, but we found it in HomeSense, so it was really cheap, was a cast iron frying pan. And they're absolutely indestructible. They're really good at getting your muscles going because they're quite heavy. But that is one of the best things that we've found. So they're brilliant for eggs. They don't leave that horrible residue. Really good for, we quite like making pancakes, and I'll mention that again in a minute. But they're really versatile, and also you can pop them in the oven. So for example, if you're doing a frittata or an omelette or something like that, you can start it on the hob, but then the whole thing can go in the oven, and they're non-toxic. And we found quite a big one, sort of about 30 centimetre one. I think it was only £12 in HomeSense or TK Maxx or somewhere like that. So there are, when we are able to get back out there again, there are bargains, and they're worth the investment because they do last a lifetime. So they're really simple swaps we can make. So we've covered quite a few things there. So we've covered utensils, how we store food, the food that we buy, and also how to get rid of some of the toxicity sort of with the canning process or the packaging. The other thing that I wanted to broach on, so not just food, but also the drinks that we have. So the same works for if you like squash or cordial, is try not to go for the plastic bottles. Try and go for glass if you do like it. And it's the same with the Tetra Paks, which is really hard because they're everywhere now. Is actually one of the inner linings is plastic. So if you're having things like milk in a Tetra Pak or juices or anything, then again, they're often heated, they're pasteurized to get rid of the bugs. And again, the plastic will leach in some toxicity into the liquid, especially things like orange juice because it's acidic. So it's trying to be more mindful when you do go to the shop, and I know it's a bit more tricky at the moment, but of the purchases that you are making, and trying to go more of the inert glass if you can, or if you are having something, if you are having to go for Tetra Pak or plastic, is maybe not having it as frequently as you have been, so it gives your body time to process the toxins out of your system. The other thing that I often find with clients is that they like fizzy water, thinking that that's really good for them. And actually fizzy water is almost as bad, in maybe not on the same level as Coke and things like that, because it's the bubbles. The bubbles in it are acidic, and to put it in a nutshell, basically when you're drinking acidic bubbly water, is it dissolves your bones. So it's all right to have every now and then, but if it's something that you're finding that you're having fizzy water on a frequent basis, is your body needs to neutralize the acidity from the bubbles. So often if you don't have enough of the alkalizing foods, so things like green leafy vegetables in your diet, then it will start taking calcium out of the bones, so it can contribute to bone thinning, things like that. So if fizzy water is something that you do have, a simple swap is to go for ideally filtered water, so you're not drinking all the chemicals in tap water and the chlorine that comes with it. And also there's microplastics in the drinking water now. So try and go for a filtered water, but with things like lemon or lime or lemon balm or some cucumber, or even making a herbal tea, but not a hot one. You can make a cold one. So things like hibiscus lemonade, which I love. So if you want that recipe, do let me know. But there's little sort of simple swaps that you can make for the drinks that you're having as well. So I'm really mindful that we've only got 10 minutes before your clap for the carers. So let's go quickly on to snacks. Sorry, I feel like I'm rushing. So if you have any questions afterwards, obviously a lot of you might need to go and do your clapping, but you can always just send me an email if there's anything that I sort of feel like I've rushed through or that you want to know more information about. So I wanted to talk about snacks. So snacks is something that maybe we're doing a lot more at the moment because we're at home. Snacks are sometimes a way of suppressing emotions. So if you are finding that you're snacking a little bit more, there are 3 questions that you need to ask yourself. The first one is, are you thirsty? Sometimes the body can get a little bit confused as to whether it needs food or water. So to have a small glass of water and then wait 10-15 minutes, and if you find that you are still hungry, then I'll make some suggestions for healthy snacks. So the first question is, are you thirsty? So try that one. Second question is, do you actually need to eat anything if you are hungry? Or is it because you're feeling an emotion that you're not comfortable with? So for a lot of us, our lives have changed quite drastically, others maybe not so, but it doesn't mean that we're immune from what's going on in the country, but also globally at the moment. And sometimes we can get caught unawares of these emotions that we're sort of tapping into or that are coming up from internally from us. So it's trying to work out as to whether it's an emotion that you're trying to suppress with food or whether you are actually genuinely hungry. So if you are genuinely hungry, when did you last eat and what did you last eat? So that's the other question to ask. So are you thirsty and are you actually hungry? Or is it an emotion that you want to work through? So there are 3 things. If you're finding that you're snacking more than normal, 3 good questions to ask yourself. And if you do need to eat, it's making sure you're going for something healthy. So not reaching for a packet of biscuits and eating lots of those, because actually they're not going to serve you. With everything going on at the moment, a huge light has been shone on our health and inflammation, and often we reach for that quick fix. So the things with the sugar, the processed food, the processed fats, the combination of the 2. So if you are finding that you are genuinely hungry, going for something like an apple with some nut butter is really good at providing that natural sugars, which your body knows how to process properly, but also don't deplete your body. So when you go for processed sugar, your body has to actually use its own reserves to process it. Whereas when you're eating something like an apple or some dates, it comes with all the nutrients. It comes sort of all pre-packaged with all the nutrients that your body needs to process the sugar in there. So try going for something like a couple of dates. I'm not saying a whole packet. 1 apple or a few raisins and some nuts, and nature's very kindly given us all the best guide for how many nuts is suitable for our bodies. So you see this little pad here sort of on the thumb. I don't know, the light's not brilliant, but that tells me how many nuts I need. So that's going to be very different to someone else. So I would say if I was having walnuts, I'd maybe 2.5 walnuts is perfect for me. So that's a really good gauge, and also you can pop them on your hand on that part and go, right, that's all I need, that is suffice to nourish me, especially if it's a snack that's just tiding you over between your main meals. Other things that we've discovered in this lockdown is tortilla wraps. You can chop one of those up into little triangles, into shapes, and just pop a little bit of paprika and just with a pastry brush, pop a little bit of oilseed rape on there and bake it in the oven for 5 minutes. And that's a really healthy nacho, which you can have with guacamole or hummus if you've got that. really simple and quick. The kids can make it if they're around. It's almost fail safe as long as you set the pinger and don't forget about it in the oven. But it goes on at about 180. Not for very long. Do check it, because each oven is slightly different, but that's a really simple, low calorie, low fat, because you can obviously determine how much oil you pop on there, snack. Other things that we've loved, I've got my little thing here. So dark chocolate, absolutely love dark chocolate. Angela, I know you're nodding away there. I know you found the most delicious chocolate, but I love dark chocolate. I actually love it with grapes. So I just have a couple of grapes with a bit of dark chocolate, and it's almost like having the raisins that were coated with dark chocolate that I used to love when I was tiny, but would never have that now. And so something like that. The grapes, really good for providing that quick fuel for the brain. So if you find that you are hungry, but you're sort of feeling a bit out of sorts and sort of a bit, not hangry, but just a bit shaky, you do actually need glucose, you need sugar, but it's slow release sugar. So you can have dark chocolate, a couple of grapes, some walnuts, a few almonds. So you're not getting a full-on rush. The nuts help slow down that release, but you're getting enough of a rush to stop you from being too stressed from not having enough sugar for brain function, but also for the rest of the body. So there's some really simple ones. Another one is having a cup of oats per banana, and you put them all in a bowl, quick mash with a potato masher, roll them up into balls and bake them in the oven for 10-15 minutes, and they're your super quick energy balls. None of this 20 different ingredients, and it costs £400 to make energy balls, which a lot of people do these days. All you need is a banana and some oats. I love oats. So yeah, that's a few things. I know you all quite well, so I'm actually, because I'm just looking at the time, I'm going to skip the nutrients, and I want to talk about the flour, because I did promise to give you a really simple way of making your own flour. So I hope that's all right, to miss the maximizing the nutrient intake. So a few years ago, we got snowed in with no food in the house, literally no food, 2 toddlers, not much fun. And the only one of the few things that we had was oats. And I discovered that you can make flour out of oats with a blender. So it's wheat-free, really supportive for the body, full of B vitamins, really calming for the gut, slow release energy. And we made the most delicious oat bread. And then the other day we had no flour, kids wanted pancakes, and realized that again, you can make flour using oats, and a lovely pancake recipe as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to email that to you with a copy of the recording of this really supercharged, concentrated session today on how to make your kitchen healthy. But yeah, I will send you those recipes. But oats are something that I've definitely found every time I've been to the supermarket, and I know quite a few of you quite enjoy oats. It's a brilliant start to the day. So overnight oats, really good at supporting blood sugar levels, calming for the gut. So hopefully you've all got that at home, and it's so easy to make. All you need is either a NutriBullet or a blender, and off you go. So I will pop those recipes out to you tomorrow. But I don't want you guys to miss your clap for the carers if you do it. We live in the middle of nowhere, so no one's going to hear us. But yes, I'm sorry, that was a full-on bleh. But lots of love to you all. Take care. Thanks for coming. Bye-bye.